That's rare. That's rare. Curious, okay. Kakuli is curious. Kakuli's other avatar is inquisitive. Okay. Rohini is uncertain. Is it the beginning of the weekend, Rohini, that is making you feeling that way?
Ravi, I'm talking about the larger picture of things. Like we don't
Okay.
know. Yeah, it is actually the end of the weekend for me. I had my offs yesterday and day before.
Oh, now I understand.
More like Monday blues.
Contextualized it very well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Confused.
Thanks.
Okay, confused. Unlike Rohini Anindra, I hope this is not about the larger things in life, right? Okay,
Yes, kind of.
kind of. Okay,
With all the uncertainty around, you
yeah.
never know when you get positive for COVID. You never know when you lose your job.
I was thinking it
Confused. What happens tomorrow?
I thought it had to do something with Deloitte's people strategy, but I never thought that it would come. Okay, all right. So good, mm, lovely. Okay, so superb, guys. So we have a host of things, right? So once again, good afternoon, right? I think we all are in this room typically from India or whatever stage the sun is or it isn't, right? For Sheeja, I think it is noon time now, right? Late morning noon. So uh, once again, welcome to this conversation on emotional agility. We will be taking you through a range of elements on how emotions play such a critical role in who we are and make us more productive, less productive, make us the person that we are. Okay, so um, Sheeja and I will be co-facilitating the session together. You will be hearing a lot more of Sheeja today than you heard her on the during the first session. Um More because this is kind of up her alley, and she is the expert in the area, doing a lot of work on psychology, and she is she kind of works with very senior leaders, coaching them, helping them with different instruments on emotional intelligence and emotional agility and psychometrics and personality and human behavior. So I think she specializes in a lot of child psychology and developmental psychology as well. So a good resource person to have at this time. A voice which is pretty schooled in this area, who can add a lot of value. So what are we going to look at today is we are going to look at why are emotions so important in our lives, right? And what is the what is the basis of these emotions? uh, how emotions are helpful to us, how emotions are at the core of our human existence, right? And then we also know that emotions um, can be a cause of concern. So, how do we become more agile with emotions, more nimble with emotions, more conscious, and what is its importance? How does it make us more effective in our personal lives, in our lives with our family members, with our colleagues, with the society at large, and stuff like that? We also look at what are the dimensions, what are the ways we can talk about this phenomena called emotional agility, right? And try and develop a little bit of this in our day-to-day lives. What small micro actions that we can start with, just like we were talking about brand. This is also a journey. In fact, this is more of a journey. This is always a journey, and all that you do is you create a greater degree of agility, right? It's like the best way I can talk to you about is something like a physical exercise skill like gymnastics or something, right? You kind of keep on building your agility and you reach a certain stage of peak, and then you again come down, but you begin to demonstrate a greater degree of self-awareness and ability to handle your own emotions than probably others are. And one of the things that I would like to position here is, um, unlike many other fields of study that we are taught in our academic education, a lot that we are taught about emotion is how to suppress it. And over a period of time, research has shown that that probably is not the best way to handle emotions. Sheeja, you want to come in here and add anything to the objectives that we have here?
Absolutely. I think, you brought up a very critical point there, the suppression of emotions. And we all know that as we, you know, in our lives, we've had a lot of experiences where we were urged to control our emotions rather than show it. There's a lot of, societal norms around emotions. In the workplace, there are rules about emotions. And overall, I think emotions being so complex, it's a subject that's been very differently perceived over
Hmm,
the years, and
hmm,
it still continues to evolve. So from a psychology perspective, if I were to talk about it, it's a very new science, I would say.
hmm,
Whatever we are reading and what the concepts that are being touted now are very relatively new in the past 50, 60 years perhaps, right? So we continue to learn more about emotions. So none of us can really say that we are experts on emotions and managing emotions and all of that. But we'll see what our discussion today kind of brings forth.
hmm. Right. And the ones who demonstrate a greater degree of what you call as emotional resilience or agility don't talk about it as a science, right? They talk
Mm-hmm.
about as a, in the realms of spirituality, right? You would hear a Dalai Lama talking about it. You would hear a, Sadguru Vasudev talking about it. You will hear a lot of these gurus and philosophers, and be that Marcus Aurelius, be that anybody talking about um, it is not in the realm of science, right? It is pretty much in the realm of uh, spirituality, if not in the realm of religion, right? which makes it which makes it slightly more difficult to access when we try to put this same emotional agility for our corporate lives, for our busy day-to-day lives, right? Spirituality is something that we only explore over the weekends, if you understand what I mean, right? When you can get up late in the morning and spirits can take hold of you, right? I don't mean that all of us do that, but some of us do tend to, be more oriented towards spirits at other times. So what I'm trying to put across is what we are trying to do here is that we are trying to look at it not through the exotic prism of spirituality, because that in itself has its own limitations, because not everybody can do that. But yes, that is definitely a school or a realm of study which has looked into emotions much more closely and has contributed to this field immensely over a period of time, right? Much more than the what Sheeja said, the Western science has looked at emotions very closely only in last 50 to 60 years and not before that. So we will chart some of those discourses as well today. Okay. Any thoughts from the participants before we move forward? How this is so important to you? Does this matter to you to know about emotional agility? Anybody?
I mean, in what we see in day-to-day life in the corporate, specifically with our work culture, what I see is a lot of pressure, and too many things have been added into our day-to-day life in the work culture.
Hmm.
and it is very important, to keep ourselves completely, controlled. I mean, emotionally we should also control everything. uh,
Hmm.
Depends again, how each and every person would take it. We
Hmm.
come across people who generally go ahead and outburst quickly, uh,
Hmm.
not able to control themselves. There are people who just break away easily. There are other people who want try and keep their emotions intact, and try and manage the situation.
Hmm.
Depends again. I mean, this is completely depends on person to person. It cannot be same for everybody. That is what is my thinking about it.
Right. Very valid point. I think the work pressure and the current times, makes it that much more important for us, for this kind of, for the want of a better word, let me say, this kind of education to happen, right? I'm not expecting that right after this session, neither is Sheeja, that all of you will be able to unravel all your emotions, and you will reach a very higher plane of this thing. Neither are we suggesting that we are on a higher plane. I think we are on the same plane as you are. All that we are trying to do is we are trying to share with you some information, some tips and tricks and methods that we have found through our, while working with ourselves as individuals and also with working with some of our clients, because both of us individually coach a lot of senior leaders and leaders at various levels, who have, we have often seen that it is the emotional angle or the adaptive angle which after a point in time plays a very critical role in success, because everybody gets a ticket to entry through their technical skills in an organization, and after a point in time the next level comes how well you can manage yourself, lead yourself and lead others, right? So that is where I think this becomes very important, right? So we will move forward with this. Okay. Thank you, Chandrakant, for contributing on that. Okay, if anybody feels you want to kind of say something, please feel free to chat about it. If you have something to add to this conversation, you can raise your hand, and you can come off mute and speak, right? So we are absolutely fine. One of the things is, if you think that your ambience, the environment in which you are taking the session from, if it is loud or it has a noise element, you may want to put yourself on mute for the most of the time, and only when you are speaking, right, you can come off mute. I wouldn't say that because your environment is noisy you should not speak, because your voice matters. This is your session. This is not just Aariv's or Sheeja's or mine, right? So this is your session. It will only come through to you when you engage with it. Okay, good. So with that ground rule being set, let's do a little bit of a reality check, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to put forward to you a Mentimeter, uh, what we call as a Mentimeter poll, right? There are some statements that you will see. You can agree or disagree depending upon your thought process, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly put across to you URL on your chat window. Please click on the chat window and you will be able to see the URL, and I'll also give you the passcode, right? If it asks for the passcode, normally it does not, but if it does ask for the passcode, use this passcode and it will help you to participate in the poll, right? So go ahead and see. Let me know if anybody has any problems in trying to access the Mentimeter poll, right? In the meanwhile, I'll just pop that up and be ready with it. Okay. Are you able to access Mentimeter? Yes, no. If you can come off mute and tell us.
Yeah, it's accessible.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you, Dipti. Right. I can already see all fives going up. Okay. You
We
strongly
should
agree with everything, so whosoever it is.
we should always act on our feelings. It depends situation. We have no control over what emotions we experience.
Lovely, no? See, the waves of emotions are flowing.
no control over what emotions we experience. We have control over what emotions we experience. Strong people never get emotional, only the weak do.
Ravi, you're sharing something while the Mentimeter, the poll keeps going on.
Yeah,
We have
I'll
no
just do that.
control over what emotions we experience. We have little control, so I little disagree. Okay, we should
Can you
always act on our feelings. This I
can you see my
yes.
We can now, yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Ravi, while this poll keeps, I mean, I'm sure you'll probably close it shortly, but I have a point or a suggestion to make.
Hmm.
Vivek here. I mean, during the course of today, it might help if you or Sheeja can touch upon the aspect of uh, how emotional agility works in a virtual environment as well, right? I mean, obviously, emotional agility in a physical presence or being in the physical workspace vis-a-vis in the current setup for the past 5 to 6 months, where most of us are obviously working from home and in the virtual environment. How does it actually play around as well, right? In general, I think that
Hmm.
might be critical as well. I mean, if it's already there as part of your agenda, that's fine. But I just thought it might be good to touch upon that.
Yeah. Good that you bring this up. We will touch upon this here today when we talk about how you can become emotionally agile, right? We will probably give you a few scenarios on how it is playing out in the virtual environment. Also, when we talk about productivity and influence, those two sessions, you will see us bringing this virtual piece coming in a lot more, because there is a you will see a lot more tools we will share with you on how you can be more effective in the interpersonal space in a virtual environment.
Okay.
Okay. Mm. All right. I think we have got 16 people out of the 20 who have answered. So if I take the three of us off, okay. So I think it's good enough number at this point in time. 80% of polling, not bad. The Election Commission of India would have been happy with this kind of a turnout, right? So if you typically look at it, you know, emotions have no place at work. So almost. 5 of you or 6 of you, 5 plus 6 plus 3, yeah, 5 plus 6, which is 11 of you, are typically saying that this is not a statement that you agree with. You strongly disagree with that statement, right? Shija, you want to elaborate on that? Emotions have no place at work. We always have been taught about this, right? The management education teaches us how we should be more stoic, right, and not bring our emotions to the workplace. You are on mute, Shija. Yeah.
It's a good response to see, because we've all been kind of socially conditioned to think that emotions and rationality don't go hand in hand. And especially in the workplace, there is no room for bringing any kind of emotion. So we constantly hear, you know, things like don't get emotions are unprofessional, check your emotions at the door before you come into work. Okay, look at it more objectively, don't bring your emotions into this. So these perceptions have been constantly presented to us, and we experience it all the time. And I think the current um, what we know about emotions does tell us that emotions do play a very important role in our lives, both professional and personal, and it's a key factor in our decision making. So
Hmm. Hmm.
it's
The other,
it's good to see this.
Yeah, the other important thing, and I think there is a lot of awareness about this, and you will
Hmm.
agree with it. While we try to keep emotions out of the workplace, we are actually trying to keep a part of ourselves out of the workplace. Because when you try to keep emotions out of work, then how are you supposed to uh, be energetic about something that your boss has told you? You are working on innovation, and you are failing, and you when you fail you feel hurt, and when you succeed you feel joy, right? So how are you going to feel joy or feel hurt? You're not a robot who walks through the office by flashing your or these days who joins a call or logs into the system. Yes, there is a certain kind of equilibrium that you are supposed to demonstrate, but then emotions are a part of your system. You cannot just they're not like water taps, right, which you close and you open when you kind of leave the bathroom, or you switch off the light. They're not like that. So they are a part of your biological self, which we are going to discuss in a big way, right?
Ravi, I feel that like see, even thinking from customer's perspective, that's again an emotion, right? You can't, if you don't, if you are just shutting your emotions, you can't even think from customer's perspective.
Yeah,
So you definitely need to have something over there to think
yeah.
from customer's perspective so that you can do your work as such.
That is such a beautiful point, Krishna, that you're bringing up, because we are taught to keep our emotions outside, yet we are taught to demonstrate empathy, right? That's the word, isn't it?
Mm.
The holy grail
True, true.
customer service. You're supposed to demonstrate empathy, and if you read literature on emotional intelligence, empathy is probably one of the most complex emotional interplays to demonstrate, which does not come very easily. You cannot empathize with somebody unless you know yourself and you know your own emotions, let alone knowing the emotions of another person and being looking at it in a non-judgmental fashion, right? So these are
True.
some of those contradictions that typical contemporary business jargon inflicts upon us, right? Be empathetic but be non-emotional. So it's like trying to say uh, use your food should taste well, but don't put salt into it. So something like that. So I don't know. I mean, if that is a good enough analogy for you to understand, right? But you can't really create good savories without salt. So that's how it is, right? So that's how we have to find the third way, right? The next piece that we are talking about here is you should always act on your feelings, right? Okay, so the jury is spread right now. They're like six of sitting right on the middle, and you want to say that, so you should act on your feelings. Anybody, what is your thought about that before me and she just start talking about it? Should we act on our feelings? Anybody?
Hi, Ravi, Sucheta here.
Right,
Uh,
Sucheta, go ahead.
yeah, so I think it depends. When you are all alone and nobody in front of you, suppose you're angry and or you want to cry, you are sad, you can act on your feelings. But when acting on your feelings can impact you in a different way, in a negative way, then you should not. It's better to keep it with yourself and then show it somewhere else. So it depends on the situation where you are.
Hmm. Okay. Good point of view, or every point of view is good here. So you're saying it is conditional depending on the context,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay.
Acting always will not work.
Okay, Sheeja, you want to add something on that?
Um, when we get into, how emotions are formed, one thing that we need to know about emotions is that they're data points. You can choose to disregard them, or you can choose to, take them as part of your decision making process, right? So while one cannot fully say that you should act on every single feeling that you have, but there are what we call as gut instincts. These are all emotional components. So there are situations where emotions provide very critical data, whereas there are situations where emotions can kind of put you off the right course, so to speak. And it involves a lot of
Hmm.
awareness, because here we're looking at emotions as a single unit, but there is a lot more that is interconnected to emotions that we need to be aware of.
Yeah. One of the things that I would like to emphasize is when you kind of think about acting on your emotions, first of all, know what your emotions are, right? Like what she just said, yeah, data points. You should know what is the data at hand. What are you acting on? Is this the most valid data that you have at hand? Is this data colored by your own perceptions, right? Is this data colored? Is this data something that you have borrowed from somebody else, right? Is this data being given to you? And I repeat again, and this is very important, guys, please mark my words. Is this data being peddled to you by 9 o'clock television, right? Okay, so emotions are very easily roused in people, right? So there is a tendency to create an emotional arousal, right? And just like individual units of human beings go through, groups go through it together, societies go through it together, countries go through it together, regions go through it together, right? When you have a World Cup, right, a football World Cup or a Olympics, you see, right, a cricket World Cup in India, right, you will see that entire stadiums are kind of, they go up, right, and there's a certain so emotions have a collective identity as well. So you might want to look into some of those things. Who's giving you that data point? What are you reacting upon? Okay, some of those are key elements. We have no control over our what emotions we experience. And 2.6, right, again, it's like there are like, there are a lot of people who strongly disagree, and there are a lot of people who kind of you know yeah. So you think you have great control over your emotions? Any thoughts on that? Anybody?
We ideally need to, but it depends from situation to situation. Like, well, I mean,
Hmm.
in the corporate world, obviously, it's extremely critical that we keep ourselves, be aware, be mindful of what we are speaking, how we are speaking, and so on. Um, hence, obviously, I mean, we can't say we did not have control over our emotions. We better have control over our emotions, either in the corporate world or otherwise as well. I mean, either ways.
Okay. So the way I would respond to this, Vivek, I know this is what has been taught to us. We should be able to control our emotions. But the analogy that I want to give you is like the child. If you ask the child not to do something, what does the child do?
Exactly, you'll go and do the same thing which you don't want.
Yeah. And the more times you keep on telling the child not to do it, the more times what will the child do?
Keep doing the same. I mean, it'll repeat it.
Right. And if you are a you know um, headstrong parent, and you really tonk and discipline and do whatever you want to do, and then what will happen after a point in time? The child will form a deep memory, which is filled with hurt, with a lot of things, etc. And it will look at that emotion, it will react to that emotion in a very strong manner. Am I making sense? That's the same thing that happens with us as human beings, right? Our brains are always scanning for threats. They were, the human brain is biologically programmed to scan for threats. The human brain did not come up did not evolve with the computer or the current times. Imagine 5,000 years ago, what was the job of the human brain? To protect the body, right? You step on a uh, something, and that is a toxic piece of thorn, you die, right? You are a little careless, an animal attacks you, you die. And the smallest of injuries, you eat a fruit which is not conducive, you die. So there's no antibiotics, there's no doctors. So imagine, what is the job of the brain? The job of the animal brain, and still the animals have that kind of brain, right, is to scan for threats. And how do you work on them? With the help of emotions. So that is what human beings are taught to do. So the more you try to bottle that up, the more will the genie try to come out, right? The more will the genie try to escape the bottle. So what you need to do is you need to start concentrating on a different bottle, right? Not on that particular bottle, because if you consider concentrating on that bottle, then it will become the only thing that you're working on. You need to give your mind something else to look at, right? Some other stories to concentrate upon. That is why when we are hooked by a certain kind of experience, and I'm using the phrase from Susan David, we get hooked by it. That becomes the only reality that we see now, right? And again, sometimes people around us are repeating that, everybody is talking about it, everybody is there, and we are all experiencing the same fear, right? In the current times, wasn't it the same thing? Remember, March 25th to April 25th, the entire nation was experiencing a certain kind of fear, right?
Hmm.
Am I making sense to you? Right?
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah, yeah.
are hooked by that. So that is the only story that is going on in our mind. There are no alternative stories, right? That is the conversation on your dining table, on your study table, on your calls, everywhere, right? So that is what it is. Okay. And the last piece, strong people never get too weak. Sheeja, you want to come in here? The strong people.
Well, that's
I
again
love people.
a social myth, I would say. And expressions are completely natural. And I don't think it has anything to do with willpower in the way we experience emotions. But of course, what we can really control is our reaction and what behavior, outward behaviors that we show. But experiencing of emotions, which we'll get into in the next couple of slides, there is a large biological basis to it. And it has nothing to do with your strength of personality or how weak or how much control you have.
Yeah. So the only thing that I want to add here before I hand it over to Sheeja is, when we say get emotional, in fact, if you see people who are supposedly strong, who have given a very strong response to a situation, are people who have got emotional with it. It's just that they've channelized it in a different way and have expressed it in a way in which it can kind of be productive, right? And not in a destructive way, right? So it is more of the expression of the emotion that makes the perception of strong or weak. Tears are not weakness. That is, or the lack of tears is not strength, right? So there is this common myth that men don't cry, right? I mean, I don't know which Hindi movie was that. Somebody said mard ko dard nahi hota. You remember
It
that?
was Mard, Amitabh
Mard.
Bachchan.
So that's what it is. So that's another Bollywood perception, right? Anindra remembers Amit ji very closely, right? So मर्द को भी दर्द होता है, सबको दर्द होता है, जब दर्द होता है सबको दर्द होता है. It's just that Amitabh Bachchan's dard comes out in a different way at Breach Candy versus yours and mine comes out different way in our local nursing homes, right? So the point is how you are able to position it. Okay, so over to you, Sheeja, right? Good conversation. I think this sets the stage for what we have for you today, right? And kind of gives you a sense of the flavor of where are we going, what are we going to discuss, and how are we going to handle it. All good, guys? Any comments at this point in time? I am mindful of the ask that Vivek has charged me with, and I will try to steer the discussion to a lot of the current times and current situations and how you handle them. Anything else that you want to, any other toppings you want to add to the pizza? Right? Okay. Okay. Good. Right? Superb. So let's go ahead. What I will do is I will now go back to the slides, right? This is already there, right? So Sheeja, there we are. Right.
Yeah, thanks, Ravi. So before we get into the discussion about how to become aware of emotions, how do we, you know, become agile with our emotions, I think we need to start at the beginning, which is, of course, what really are emotions. And um, I'd like to sort of invite some responses from the group as to what currently, what is your understanding of what emotions are? You can either put it on the chat or...
Yeah, let me, okay, stop share. Anybody, what emotions are?
It is the current state of your feeling as to how you feel about something.
Okay,
Yes.
any other responses?
Obviously, because of a catalyst or something, right? I mean, emotions generally get triggered because of external and internal, catalyst, but a lot happens because of what happens around you, and the way you react slash respond to it matters. And through that, you show your emotions in various forms. So it's how you express yourself is what essentially emotions are.
I
Okay,
think it's a brain's reaction to your internal and external, whatever is happening internally and externally. How does your brain react to it? How does your brain process that information is the emotion? And of course, I mean, our outward behavior is what we do with that information is our behavior. How being mindful about it is important, I guess.
okay. So
Absolutely.
Francis says, Sheeja, it's the chatter, it's the thoughts, it's the feelings, it's the emotions, right?
Okay.
Or the expression of your feeling is what Krishna is
So,
saying.
what I was trying to say is that something that happens, stimuli out, then you react with your words. You start chattering in your mind, and that leads to the direction of that thought into that feeling, and that feeling in the body converts into energy in motion, and that's
Mm,
how we start reacting into the form of a behavior too for a long time, and that too also might lead to depending happiness or anxiety.
okay, okay.
Okay.
Very close to the textbook, right? Okay.
Yes, fair
Any
enough.
thoughts? Yeah, very good one. I mean, anybody else who wants to talk about it, more as a personal language, how you see emotions.
I would say it is it is any kind of a reaction uh, that we portray or that automatically gets portrayed in front of others or when you are even alone. And it can be based on your facial expression or your behavior or your talking uh, or uh, your emotion that it comes out in terms of laughter or tears or happiness.
Okay, okay, good.
To add to
Uh,
it, we can also say that some sort of instincts or maybe intuition that you have. At times we proactively assume that the environment around me is uh, going to do harm or is going to be favorable for me, and then accordingly we react to certain things, and we involve our intuitive powers as well.
yeah, Ravi, I think uh, in simple words, I'm not going the bookish language or something. It's a personal thought. It's a reaction of the actions. Means suppose if you are talking to someone, it depends how he talks to us. If we talk in the emotional behavior, we sometimes we also got into behavioral aspect or means thoughtful feelings. We are trying to cop or make the wavelength with them. I'm not saying okay, I'm reaching up to your question or not, but
Yeah,
it's action of reaction means it's a two-way
right,
communication.
right. It is very important to. It is very important to. Let me use the word struggle or grapple with this understanding of what emotions are, because we all have them. Would you agree? It is unavoidable. Would you agree? Right? It is there in us. It impacts us. So it's good that we at least start getting a sense of what they are. Right? So Sheeja, if you want to take lead on this.
Yes. So from what we've heard everyone express so far, there is a broad understanding, right? And then we've included thoughts into it. We've included reactions. We've included the external experiences or internal experiences that we go through. And all of this, of course, everyone is right. It's all part of uh, emotions. When we talk about emotions, these are things that we talk about. But if you look at, emotions, individually, there has been no definition as yet, really. There is a huge controversy around how do you define emotions. The research has been going on for a while now, and there are multiple theories of emotion, some connected to action, some connected to biological processes, some connected to psychological states, right? So so yeah, you can continue to ponder over what, how do you want to define emotions. But I think what's clear up till now is that when you experience emotion, there is something that triggers it, which could be internal or external, so what we call a stimuli. And then there are some physiological responses that are linked to emotions. Like, for example, when you feel angry, that our body has certain reactions. We show certain things that other people can really see.
Yeah.
And also the fact that there is what we call as the physiological and then the expressive comment, the expressive aspect of it, which is, you know, our reaction and our expressions, and in terms of tone of voice, everything that the others can see about us, right? So that is the point that we've reached in terms of defining emotions. Of course, there are a lot of theories out there, and if it's a topic that interests you, then you can do a lot more research on that. But then understanding the three components that contribute this whole creation of emotion is perhaps a starting point for us.
Right. So if you in to kind of give you a slightly more, I just to make it a little more individually accessible, if you look at this graphic that we have here, there are these different elements, right, which create
Mm-hmm.
different stimuli, different contexts. You're going to an office, or there's this kind of wedding rings, or whatever you want to call it, right? A handshake, or these are all stimuli, or you're getting awarded with a degree. These are all stimuli. These are all social conditions in which you are a part of, right? You are in a context. That context creates a certain physiological response. Your body starts responding to it in a certain way. Remember, what is the human brain for? The human brain is typically for, scanning threats, right? So it is primarily looking for threats, but it also knows when it is not threatened, it can relax a little bit, right? So there are certain hormones, or there are certain neurotransmitters, as we call them, which are the ones which make you relax, which make you feel happy. And we call them like endorphins, or you will hear some of these terms, serotonin and dopamine. By the way, the word dope, right, that is so prevalent in the current times, actually comes from the word dopamine, right, which means it makes you feel happy, and when you go through a breakup, you take chocolate, etc. So now that is again, or when you feel stressed, or you are under fear, or you are under some kind, your body gets what is called as cortisol, right? That actually, or when there is a rush, right, there is adrenaline, which kind of creates a certain kind of ability for the body to um, burn more oxygen, or burn more calories, and create more energy, so that you can actually go ahead and fight that thing, right? So that is the physiological response. And when you physiologically react, when, say, for example, sometimes you actually bang the table, or you don't bang the table, but your face shows it, or sometimes you even control that. That is your behavior that the world gets to see. So there is a stimulus, there is the physical part of it, your body experiencing it, and then there is the behavior that the world gets to see. So there are three key elements, as you can see, three stages. First, the environment, which gives you the stimulus. The pin on which the pin is lying on the floor, you jump on it, you feel pain. And when you jump, the world sees you jumping. It may not see the pin, right? So if you typically look at it, that's the thing. Now, as a human being, right, the endowment that we have, the brain that we have, allows us to create a gap between the stimulus and the behavioral response, right? The more gap that you are able to create, the more willingly you are able to observe your emotions from a balcony, the more emotionally agile you go on to become. You acknowledge your emotions, you see what they are, and you go on to become that, right? So that is how this thing goes, because otherwise the literature is all over the place, as she just said. And if you get lost in the mire of literature, it's actually a quagmire. It'll suck you in, right? I mean, and some of us who have been trying to read up, find out about it, uh, honestly, it's very difficult to make sense out of it, right? I mean, that's my with my limited IQ, I would say that's the way I kind of perceive it, right? Yeah. Any thoughts on this? Does this help you to understand? There is a stimulus which the environment gives you. Your body feels something, you behave in a certain way. Three stage, right? We love it to be staged out, right? Makes sense? Mind you, it is simply it is very simplistic, but it is not, emotions are not as simple as this. What we are trying to make it is a very simplistic kind of a map for you, but it is not as simple as that. Okay? It is a much more complex process. But does this give you some sense here? Yes? Okay?
Yes, yes, Ravi.
It does, yeah, very much.
Right? So, Sheesh, if you want to kind of take this forward, how our body experiences these different kinds of emotions.
And yes, I think not much discussion required on this one, because all of us have experienced any one of these emotions, and we're quite familiar with what goes on. In the case of anger, there is that sensation of your body wanting to sort of
Yeah, this
surge forward, right? And then if it's happiness, there is that increase in energy that we feel, or when it's sadness, there's a lack of energy that we feel. And so that, in terms of defining or identifying emotions on a universal level, at a universal level, there's been some research on that, and a person who's very widely known for that is Paul Ekman. And he was perhaps uh, he's a scientist, and he was the first to really say that there are these 6 basic emotions. And he mapped out all of the reactions that are visible. uh, they may not all be conscious processes. See, when you're angry, you don't have to tell yourself that my nostrils need to flare and my eyes need to sort of get larger. All those physical manifestations that we experience are very natural processes, right? And so the 6 emotions that he identified, his research also included, you know it was not limited to a particular geography, but it was across the globe, even in some remote tribes. So what he noticed was, this is something that all of us experience. But if you take into consideration some of the secondary emotions, there are over 34,000, 35,000 emotions that we can really term. Our lexicon, our language gives us the opportunity to name that many emotions that we experience. So it gets more complex from that perspective.
Yeah. Just
um,
just to give
yes, go ahead, Ravi.
just to give you a sense, a human being is supposed normally on a normal day. Science shows that we speak around 16,000 words in a day, and around 12,000 of these words are around our emotional state. So
Mhm.
this is how prevalent as it is, right? So you can imagine what role does emotion play in our lives. In fact, to further enhance the point, if you can see this slide, this is a very kind of a recent piece of work. And today, you know there the one of the things that happened is the world of psychology started talking about emotions more in terms of the behavior, what you see as another person reacting. But what has happened is, in recent times, with CT scan and MRI becoming very easily available for research, and a lot of research with neuropsychology happening, where you kind of look at the body, or and the neurochemicals and what they do to the body when you come through emotions. There is See, this is a quick snapshot, and we have given you some of the Rita Hari's research on this, right? That you can see this, that different emotions actually impact different parts of your body, right? You can see, right? I mean, there is this color code which is there. The colors which are a little towards the blue are the colors what we call as, cooler colors, right? The body gets cooled down, whereas the colors which are like, are more yellowish in nature are warmer colors, right? So the temperature, so goes up. So if you're really feeling very, very happy, right, you're really feeling very happy, the chances of your body temperature being slightly, or the body showing a larger temporal heat is much more higher. What we are trying to emphasize to you is, understand that emotions are just not in your mind, right? We have long thought that emotions don't impact us. Emotions have the capacity to make us ill or healthy. This is a very important element we want to bring to you. Just like just like you can fall, you can have a stomach bug, you can also have a thought issue, or a psychological ailment, right? Now, in a country like ours, we are not taught to talk about it, because talking about an emotional issue, or talking about preponderance of this, is like we have a mental issue. That's the common parlance we use, right? Oh, he's going to a psychiatrist. It's like a taboo. No, it's not like a taboo. Just like you can have a stomach bug, you can have fever, you can have a headache, you can get a migraine, you can have all kinds of fevers, all kinds of diarrheas. You can also have all kinds of emotional and, psychological ailments that you can go through, right? The way you come out of it, just like you have physiotherapy, you have coaching, you have therapy, you have psychiatrists, you have psychotherapists, and all kinds of people who are there to mental health professionals to help you, right? And when you go through some of these stages, say for example, somebody doesn't do well in an exam and feels absolutely in the dumps, or sometimes people are successful, they don't know how to handle success. I'll give you an example of it. I don't want to, don't take it in a pejorative way. There are certain people who just don't know how to handle success. A great example would be Pandya and KL Rahul. You remember that episode, right? I mean, how do you handle success? So sometimes emotions have a tendency to over empower us, right? And that is a very important thing for us to understand. So there is a physiological basis to emotions, there is a biological basis to emotions, and there is a behavioral basis where we are expressing it to the world, right? So this is the expression. When you're disgusted, look at your face. When you have fear, look at your face. The same person's face, right? Which is kind of showing you these different shades, right? And by the way, what is acting all about? Being able to demonstrate these on your face, right? The face is the canvas. And that's why a Shah Rukh Khan is so great. He can be disgusted in one shot and then be romantic in another shot. So that's what makes him so, so super. Makes sense? Okay. Anything you want to add here? Anybody? Any comments you have?
And I think, Ravi, you touched upon a point of how emotions play a role on our health, right? I mean, mental stress is something which obviously plays a very big role because it manifests itself in various forms on a day-to-day basis. Um, and obviously, I mean, mental stress is caused due to physical as well as mental tension or whatever that you undergo. That indeed, I'm sure recent research and a lot of, uh, I mean, white papers that have been submitted clearly indicate that mental stress has a huge impact on anyone, right? It causes a lot of other
Yeah.
internal damage as well, in general.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Right. Right. I mean, think about it. I mean, when there is a conflict, right, you automatically, your digestion takes a beating, right? You feel more acidic. You need more ranitidine. You need more digoin, right? What you could be going through is more of a, what we call as an internal churn, right? Right. There is this common phrase, butterflies in the stomach, right? A sense of uncertainty, surprise, what is coming next, you don't know, right? So how do you deal with it? Makes sense. Now now to Juliet's point, how do you control? Now this word control, we are going to examine very closely. Can we control Now let me ask you, can you control stomach pain, guys?
No.
Can you control fever?
No.
And you want to control emotions, right? When it has this kind of a physical basis? What makes you think you can control emotions? If emotions are so physically located, like fever, and here is a CT scan which is telling you that your body parts, different body parts lit up depending on the kind of emotion you are experiencing, how can you think you can control? The word control is very interesting. You can manage, right? When you have fever, you take a paracetamol and you manage that fever, or you work with that and you go to a professional. You know what I mean to say, right? So there is a way you kind of work with that situation. So you don't use the word controlling fever, do you?
No, we can manage only.
Right, you get what I'm trying to bring you towards, right? So this entire debate of trying to control emotions is a debate, and we will take you to the bottom of that debate today also, where all that comes from, right? Okay, so Sheeja, you want to explain the brain, because you are the one who's most connected to
Yeah,
the brain here than I am.
not really, but yes. the so the all of our discussion has been around the leading to the our conclusion that, of course, there is a biological basis for emotions. Where does it originate? It originates in our brain, and there is an evolutionary aspect to it. Why did we even have to start with emotions? Why did we have to have structures in our brain to create and create all these bodily changes, propel us to action? Why did we even have to have this? Because the survival of the human race depended on it. So what we see in the brain, the limbic system that we see in the brain, is one of the oldest systems that developed.
This
The
part.
brain has been constantly evolving, and the higher cortical structures came in later. The rational part of the brain, I'm not saying it was not there, but the amount of evolution, the amount of you know uh, neurons, and the uh, the complexity of the brain increased
Over.
over a period of time, right? But what was most important during the early phase was really the limbic system, because that's what really helped humans to survive, to be able to see a threat. It's not just about seeing the threat, it's about our brain registering the threat, creating that emotion which triggers other functions in the other parts of the brain to act, right? So you see a stimulus, and then the brain has recognizes or generates an emotion, and that emotion is what kind of leads to an action from our end, and that's what has kept us alive.
Right.
You see a tiger. In those days, the body needed to react. It was flight or fight, and that was a threat situation. But now, when we look at this tiger inside a zoo, how do we react? We don't start running when we see the tiger in the zoo, right? So, but we do feel emotion. We feel fear. Okay, some of us might feel awe. What a beautiful animal it is. Some of us might feel sadness looking at it, because the numbers are depleting by the day. It is going extinct. So, but the emotions have changed over time, and that's been an evolutionary process for us, right? But what I'm trying to draw your attention to is the fact that while emotions are centered in the limbic system, there is an interconnection with our rational brain, which is the cerebral cortex and all of its various components, as well as our memory, our attention, you know, um, our how our bodily functions. All of this is interconnected. The limbic system has some of these. Why we bring up all these terms is because it's good to know what is acting or what is triggering emotions in our brain. The key component of limbic system, which is the amygdala, uh,
Yeah.
you must have heard about what we call as the amygdala hijack. Now, typically how the brain should work is that you see a stimulus, the stimulus goes into your thalamus, and then it kind of reaches out to the higher brain structures, it reaches out to the various components of the limbic system. The amygdala then looks at, okay, what kind of a threat is it? Is it a serious threat? Is it a moderate threat? And then based on that, it takes a decision. You've experienced certain emotions, and your rational brain takes over, says, okay, this is not so much of a threat, okay, and so this is how you need to react, and then kind of kickstarts all of the bodily functions that need to happen, right? But because of our evolutionary programming, there are situations when we look at a stimulus, we kind of conflate that stimulus into something bigger than what it actually is. Okay, let's, for example, take a situation. You're in a meeting room and your boss walks in. Everyone's kind of, greeting him, and he doesn't acknowledge you. Okay, obviously, the stimulus there is you've been ignored. There will be some reaction that you experience. There is an emotion that gets formed, right? It could be anger. It could be, you feeling undermined, feeling small. It could be sadness. Now, there is, based on this particular stimulus, there is a certain amount of emotion that you can experience. It could be anything. But what could also happen is that because emotions are so interconnected, you could your brain could bring up a past memory. It could bring up an automatic story that you've had, that nobody respects me. Or it could bring up something like a thought about how you should not, a value or something like, I will not allow anyone to disrespect me. So it's such a small stimulus, but then the emotion that gets generated, the intensity of the emotion that gets generated sometimes becomes more than what is required. And you see it as a threat when it was not really a threat. And that's when your, limbic system, predominantly the amygdala, kind of takes over. It shuts down your rational thinking, and you behave in a manner that eventually might lead to some kind of embarrassment later, or something that you regret later. You could just, it could range from you walking out of the room to you shutting yourself out, or you could just not participate in the meeting. You may tell yourself, no, I'm not going to be contributing at all in this meeting. So that's how emotions kind of propel you to act in different ways. And that's why understanding the biological basis is important, not in depth perhaps, but knowing, what's happening in our brains.
Sheeja, I have a question.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what is the reason that the intensity might be more or less? Is it just prior experiences, or do you think there can be a lot of other complex reasons to it?
The intensity is typically because you've also when you experience an emotion, it also activates other parts of the brain, like your attention, your memory system. It also activates certain what they call as mental models that you have
Right.
about how certain things need to be, right? Your expectation is when you greet someone, they need to greet you back. So there is already a model that you have, right? And sometimes when these get violated, you tend to see the issue bigger than what it is.
Okay.
And that's perhaps why we tend to. And the thing with the an amygdala hijack is that because your rational processes get shut down, you're not in control of your behaviors anymore. It's the threat response that is working, and they generally tend to be quite fierce or inappropriate most of the time. uh, you know when you need to be responding with a milder response, and if you get too intense about it, then it of course comes across as inappropriate. I don't know if I've answered your question.
You surely have.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So let me take a slightly different way of trying to explain the same thing to you. Okay. Um, what is amygdala supposed to do? Amygdala is the part of your brain which is supposed to protect you from physical threats, right? Okay. Your rational brain may not even have the time to find out the nature of the physical threat, and it is supposed to trigger a quick reaction, right? This is like a rapid response team, if you like that term.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, for example, there is a bus which is coming towards you, right? And you are blowing you are honking your horn, but it is not giving you, and it is coming on the wrong side of the road, right? What are you going to do? Are you going to calculate the speed of the bus, the weight, the mass of the bus, multiply the speed with the mass, calculate the momentum, and then take a decision whether you want to move out or not, or you will just quickly jump out of the way? Which one are you going to do? Obviously jump out of the way, right? Now this jumping out of the way is something, what has happened? Amygdala has taken over, it has perceived a threat, it has overridden all other circuitry in the brain, right? And has kind of taken a decision to save your body. Its job is to save your body, is to stop you from physical threats. Over the 5,000 years, it always dealt with physical threats. Now the physical threats have reduced for human beings. There are, but still they have reduced. So what it now scans for are what we call as emotional threats or psychological threats. The kind of threat that Sheeja talked about. You walked into the meeting, you greeted your boss did not care to greet you back. Or people gave you a cold shoulder. Now that is a kind of a threat, right? That is a kind of a threat where your status or your autonomy is being questioned. And what happens is, just like when you were dealing with the bus, here is a bus that has struck you. It's not a physical bus. It's the emotional bus which has struck you. Your higher cortex is disabled and you have engaged with it, right? Okay. And you might actually stomp out of the meeting. Later be, when the higher cortex get enabled, oh, that was such a stupid reaction, right? So there is a time when you start processing it differently. Why you had so many other options? Because at that point in time, you perceived that as a threat which is larger than what it was. It kind of left you emotionally disabled, right? I hope I have been able to give you a kind of a kind of a frame for you to understand how it happens, right? So today, if you see status get disturbed, we get very jittery. Certainty gets disturbed, we get very jittery. Autonomy gets disturbed, we get very jittery. Relatedness gets disturbed, we get very jittery. There is something called fairness. We are not being dealt fairly. That gets disturbed, we get very jittery. There is a piece of research done by this guy called David Rock, right, who's a neuroscientist and has done kind of work on neurology and neuro leadership and stuff like that. He says that there's a scarf, the scarf gets disturbed. Status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, fairness. I'm going to talk about scarf when we are dealing with influencing others, right? In the coming modules, we are going to be talking about that. But I hope you understand. The amygdala is there. It is the oldest part of the reptile brain, right? Most reptiles have this. This prefrontal cortex is something that is got developed in last 20,000 years or whatever you might want to, whatever. I don't want to put a timeline to it, but it is the most recent part of the brain. And if you look at its processing capacity, since we are all in the world of computers today, this is like a 4 GB or an 8 GB RAM versus the limbic system, which is like a few TBs, which is where all your memories, your habits, your emotions are stored, right? It is very easy to over empower, right? It is very easy to get your RAM heated up, right? It's a very small part, and honestly, the other reptiles do not have such a well developed cerebral cortex. The other forms, right? So for example, like an earthworm or something, right? If you have done this gory experiment of trying to cut an earthworm, you see two parts of the worm actually moving in two directions, because what it is brain is part through the central spinal cord, which is across the body. unlike the human being where there is a brain which is restricted to a certain part of the body. Okay, so if you now, we don't want to get into too much of the biology part of it, but I hope you understand that here is this animal brain, right? And there is this saying that goes, he brings or she brings out, or that situation brought out the animal in me. What is that animal? The animal is your inability to control your rational or your higher, you know, systems of decision making. Okay, anybody has a comment to this? Chandrakant, anybody else? Too complex? Give us some feedback, we are ready to work with you.
I just want to bring up the point that Julia is making, and she's saying that perhaps she will not react in the meeting, but it would continue to trouble her, and the reaction might occur, in some other time during the day, and which could be harmful, which is yes, very, very relevant. Yes.
And that's because you suppress yourself, right? I mean, you're not able to let things out the way you ideally would want to.
Absolutely, you're
Right.
so correct. Because as soon as that amygdala got charged, your body had a cortisol flux. It released cortisol. And that cortisol, unless you have taken 4 glasses of cold water and have visited the loo 2-3 times, it has not exited your body. Am I making sense to you? It has not exited your body. So it will continue to trouble you unless you kind of bring and neutralize that with something else, which is another neurotransmitter. It could be an endorphin, right? Which is a happy hormone. Makes sense to you? That is why people, when they feel sad, they cannot bring a happy thing. They go and dope, right? They go and take an Alprax because the Alprax tries to down the impact of the cortisol, makes you feel high, right? Am I making sense to you? Right? And when you get into that high, artificial high, it becomes a habit, right? You like taking that grass, you like being stoned, and the rest is history, right?
Are you suggesting then, Ravi, that to in such situations, which we come across on quite a few occasions, right? You channelize your thought process elsewhere and then take it away, right? So that it, like what I agree with what Juliet is mentioning,
Yeah.
it'll then become detrimental for you if obviously you don't express yourself the way you ideally would want to. You're saying that channelize it somewhere else, do something else which will. Okay.
Yes, yes. Do something else. Start looking at the same thing. Get a view from the balcony. We are going to come to that process. That is the process of emotional agility. Okay, makes sense to you? This is a vast topic, guys, and if you look at it, uh, in the last few years, people have started looking that IQ is not sufficient. A lot of work on human psychology, especially happened during the world wars, and the effort was to predict how well is this particular human being going to behave, right? Okay, how much of capacity, mental capacity does he have? And mental capacity typically got calculated in your ability to do math, what we call as the STEM subjects, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math, right? Or ability to learn languages, etc., which were typically abilities of your cerebral cortex and things that it could do. That was only one form of intelligence, right? Then there came in multiple theories of different kinds of intelligence, and they started seeing that while IQ gives you a seat to a good university or makes you get a good job, to become successful. Now Harvard did this major study. They, around the 1990s found out that people who were actually coming and giving more of donations to the Harvard Alumni Trust were people who were not so good in academics. Now what was the reason? The people who were giving more money did not score as many good grades. So was IQ related to the money or not? So that is something that struck these Howard guys, right? And then they started looking at what is it that made them more successful in the business world, right? And the success consequently led to they being more altruistic, more philanthropic, and more socially well adjusted, if you may like, right? Then probably the ones who were typically the top of the class. Not that the top of the class were not doing well. I'm not suggesting that. But they started looking at other predictors of human success other than IQ. Right? And that is where the importance of EQ has come into picture. And if you today look at, so much so that World Economic Forum says that EQ is going to play, right, or emotional quotient is going to play a huge role in predicting human success. And organizations today kind of create competency models, behavioral models in your interviews. They want to find out how are you going to react to a situation, right? So the interviews have become more trying to predict.
Psychometric test.
Psychometric experiments, yes, I mean, they are up our alley. So that's what we are trying to do. We are trying to say that, how because this part is under the water. IQ is very easily visible, very easily distinguishable. One of the reasons it was because it is very easily predictable. It is very easily quantifiable. Anybody who has done a B.Ed would know that you do your IQ equations and it's just a matter of math. Right, Sheeja, if I'm not mistaken? Right? It is a much more
Yes.
easily quantifiable characteristic than probably emotional quotient is. Right? Makes sense? Right? So if you typically look at it, here is what the history is, and if you go by this, for good, for good, 2000 years, it is the rational brain and the rationality, etc., which ruled over. IQ became in one form or the other. you know some people called it IQ, they did not call it IQ. I think therefore I am, cogito ergo sum, right? And the Descartesian logic and all of that, man is a rational being and all of that kind of stuff. So a lot of that kind of happened. But if you see, the biggest thing that happened was the world wars, and the world wars changed that. If you were so rational, why was the Christian world fighting against each other? Right? Okay. Makes sense to you? Why was the Christian world fighting against each other? That is the time that a lot of research started moving into what is called as the evolution of the EQ research, 1960s, and and then in the 1995, Salovey and Mayer came up with their landmark work on emotional intelligence, and then this New York Times, Washington Post journalist called Daniel Goleman got together with them, and then he kind of published that emotional intelligence at workplace, and a lot of that happened. And then there is this very important piece that happened in late 2000, around 2013 and 2010, when this lady called Susan David, right, she started talking about emotional um, agility rather than emotional quotient, right? She started saying that don't suppress your emotions, use your emotions to get a higher form of benefit, right? uh, get into a form where you can channelize that energy in your body to become a better version of yourself, right? uh, till this point, the entire exercise was on how can you get control over your emotions. And by the way, a lot of the education on emotional intelligence still is trying to control emotions, huh? They are still stuck in that kind of a situation. Now if you look at it, look at the East, by the way, right? The mindfulness world, Buddha, and before that our yogic system and the Vedic system, etc., right? Around 5th to 6th century BC onwards, they have started dealing with this. There are sutras on this, right? The Eastern school of it, the Zen philosophy, whatever you call it, they have always talked about a much more spiritual basis to emotions. Not exactly, they did not go out and do a survey monkey survey and collected data and published white papers on it, but they had a methodology to handle this much better. Right? They had a methodology to handle this much better, which is now being used by people like Susan David to make sense out of the nonsense that the human civilization has got itself in over the last 2,500 years. Okay? Am I making sense to you? Does this give you a sense of the
A lot of sense.
right? The evolution of this chart, right? Okay,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
right. So this is how it is. This is how it is. We kind of sorted it out. Now we had, they in fact refuted us saying that this is tribal knowledge. You can imagine, right? Or it is pop culture, like the Osho thing that happened in the United States, right? But it is much beyond that. It's much beyond that, and they have now started realizing it. And again, the realization has come from people like Eckhart Tolle and all of them, who talk about mindfulness, etc., and make it a big thing, right? I would say Vietnam taught them a big lesson. I mean, I'm a student of more of culture studies, and Sheeja is a student of more of human psychology. So we kind of, bring this together and try and understand. I think it was the Vietnam which taught them that it's a different war that they were fighting, right? Okay, now let's go ahead. So what does this lady Susan David do, right? Sheeja, you want to introduce Susan David to all of us?
Yes, sure. Susan David, she she's a psychologist. She's one of the most renowned management thinkers, and she has been, her approach to emotions and understanding emotions and how to manage emotions has been quite different from the prevailing theories, and it's the culmination of her 20 years of research happened in this book that she wrote in 2016. It's a very good book. It's called Emotional Agility. Um, to what is the full heading of the book? I forget. To Thrive. Ravi, help me out here. The name of Susan's book.
Yeah, I think to thrive with your emotions, right? I mean, rather than
Yeah. But it's now touted. When her research was published in the in HBR, the Harvard Business Review, it was touted as the biggest management idea. So she brings a new, fresh approach to how we deal with emotions. We talked a lot about the brain processes. We talked about all these three components. The stimulus, and then you have all of these brain processes, and then you have the expression of emotions. Now, where she is coming in with emotional agility is in that intervening space between experiencing a stimulus and the reaction that we show to the world. And she says that there are ways to manage how we experience emotion, the thoughts that we associate with certain emotions, and how we can change the behavior that we want to show. And all of this is kind of rooted on the fact that whatever you do, you need to be able to bring out a positive outcome. It should be an outcome that helps you thrive. And it's very relevant in our current times because everything is so uncertain. Everything is changing. The VUCA world, as we call it, it's so critical that we are able to take all of these various stimuluses, make sense of it, look at it from a different lens, and be able to behave in manners that helps us lead productive lives. Otherwise we get paralyzed, we get locked into our situation, the emotions, and it really changes the course of our life, and many of us don't end up achieving what we want to in our lives.
Sheeja, can I tell something, share my personal experience here?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, actually, my elder son is a thalassemia patient. He is 11-year-old now. These lines, they resonate with my life extremely. I mean, as I'm going through these lines, yeah, you can understand, no? My emotions, you can understand. You can realize that. So, now I realize that really, those emotions of mine haven't driven me in negative ways. They haven't made me bitter, about life, but instead they have made me more strong. I used to be a very timid person. I used to be very weak. I used to be very, get scared of anything as simple as a storm and all those things. Okay. And then this happened with me. Okay. And now I feel that, yes, I have been able to channelize my emotions in a much better way, Um, I have been able to control myself. I have been able to put a fight every month, It's it's a difficult time for us. But yeah, I'm doing it. So I am being able to resonate with these sentences in from my life experiences itself. It's great to know this now. I'm doing a good job, yeah. Thank you.
Good job, Kakuri, and I understand. Honestly, dealing with a child who has a condition, and you're kind of keeping the child happy, right, and keeping your equilibrium. And to Sheeja's point about that VUCA world, the most important thing about Susan David is that she is a South African. Okay, and she herself saw the trouble of apartheid, and her research for the 20 years was in the most struggling and most traumatic times of social strife, of killing, of kidnapping. If you know anything about Cape Town, and other than the South African cricket team that we normally get to know, it is one of the most difficult cities to live in, right? Right from the limited amount of water that you get to consume to what you do. It is a very difficult city to live in, right? You need to be very careful about where you go, which part of the day you go, are you carrying sufficient security. So the threat perception is very high, right? And she is one person who has dealt with this, and is talking about emotions in a certain way, that it should not over empower you to take you down that negative slope, as it were. How it can still be a source of taking you on a positive thing, even if the things around you are not as good as they ideally should be. She is not one of those who carried out her research in the beautiful climes of Western Europe. Nothing to do with Sheeja's balcony, right? I mean, she's based out of Switzerland, but you understand what I'm trying to say. She was in a very strife-ridden kind of a place, and she resonates very well with another person who did a lot of work in this area, how you respond to emotions and how you gain a higher control over your mind, called Viktor Frankl, right? Man's Search for Meaning. If
It's a
you
wonderful book. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it's a
and
wonderful.
you know the story of Victor, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he went about,
No.
everybody was killed, right? Yeah. So anybody wants to talk about the story of Victor? It is probably, and as moving as the story of that Kakoli was trying to talk about, right? Yeah. So so this is a very important element. If you look at what she does is, and this is where we're trying to bring this to you, what emotional agility is and what it is not. No, if you just absorb this slide, right, and let us know if there's something that strikes you before we get in quickly into telling you what are those three key things you can do to become more emotionally agile, right, and practice them. Uh, is there something that strikes you here, resonates with you?
Hmm. It's about being nice, not about. I mean, the first one on the right hand side, the red color background, about being nice all the time. It's about being honest.
Hmm.
That's something that resonates with me.
Yeah. You can't fake it, right? It's not
Yeah,
about
yeah.
faking it. A lot of people think that emotional agility or emotional intelligence is about putting on that mask, right? Right. T.S. Eliot said, making faces to meet faces. That's not emotional agility. It's about being yourself. Right? Again, it doesn't mean that you are so touchy-feely that if somebody tells you something, you get into a shell and you become a porcupine. That's not, or a hedgehog. Right? That's not the way it is again. Okay. Also look at the green side, right?
Yeah,
What is
yeah,
it?
yeah. Mm.
Remember what I love the phrase that Sheeja used. Emotions are like a data point, like many data points that you get, right? They guide your decision making, and many a times they form a higher form of moral compass that tells you what is right, what is wrong. Your conscience, as we call it in, some of us who went to the conscience, the moral science, right? The conscience, right? So which is which helps you. Make sense? Okay, so let's move forward, right? Any chat, please feel free to come and talk about it, right? There are some personal benefits. The personal benefit of agility is that you actually get better health. I feel this as the most important thing. When you're emotionally down, your health is down. You fall sick more often. You get more headaches. You get more your stomach upsets. There is this something called irritable bowel syndrome now, etc., etc. When you become a little more emotionally agile, your career gets better success. And I don't mean success just in terms of you getting more promotions or earning more money, but you are more balanced. You are able to use your resources optimally. You do better problem solving, right? You are a much more effective leader. You resonate more with your groups. And as a leader, if you don't show them, don't show emotional agility, you are a lack of a leader, right? Imagine working for, and I'm sure all of us have had some experience or the other, working for a leader who's emotionally, you know, not as agile as we would want them to. Right? Very difficult to innovate for those leaders, right? Give our best for those leaders. And a great leader who called it a day used to be known, right? The cool Dhoni. Makes sense? A very emotionally agile leader. I mean, countless number of times we have talked about him in our leadership sessions for his ability to handle situations, process his emotions. It's not that he feels any less emotionally, right? But how he manages them, right? How he orients them. Okay. Good. So here is the three-step process, right? How do you do this? Juliet, you were asking about it, right? How do we do this? Okay.
Yes, yes, sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yep. So this is the first stage. Firstly, try and understand the world of emotions is not cut and dry. The picture or the words in the foreground are as important as the waves in the background on this slide. They are like waves. They cannot. If you take a stick and try to separate water, it will not get separated. So that is what emotions are. So they tend to flow. There is this status of flow that they have. Okay. So what you can do is you can, just for our own benefit, right? So that we can cognitively understand this better, right? To make it simple and clear for us, we are kind of saying take this three-step process. We have even simplified Susan David's work. Susan David has a four-step process, which is a little more complex, etc. We have tried to make it a little redux version of this. Okay. So what we are saying is, we are saying three D's. First D is discover, right? Which is about your ability to get what are you feeling. Discover what are you feeling. Are you feeling angry? If you're feeling angry, what has made you angry? Your primary emotion could be anger. But what is the secondary emotion? The secondary emotion could be that you fear losing something. You're angry that you missed the flight. But the fear is that you may not be able to reach on time for your interview. Right? Understand? The expression of anger happens on the cab driver who took a long circuitous route so that he could earn a little more. Right? So what are you feeling? You're feeling anger. You label that. You know where is that seat of anger. It comes from which place. The moment you start going through this process, right, you have started engaging your front brain. Right? You have started taking your thought process out of the clutches of the limbic system. You're now becoming more and more self-aware. Right? Okay. So if you look at it, each stage, so pause. Very important thing is to pause. Create that gap between the stimulus and response. Right? Create that gap between the stimulus and response. Say you are flying or you're trying to connect this team member of yours. This team member was supposed to give you a report on time, but you have not got the report on time, right? And you're trying to call up this team member frantically. So pause. What are the other things that could have impacted? Pause. What is the feeling? What is the feeling that you are getting at this point in time? Right? The moment you are able to label that, you are able to now see what you are feeling. Right? And know the triggers. Why are you feeling that way? Because you expected the report, it was due yesterday, it has not come to you. Mind you, it sounds very simple, But when you are actually in the grip of your emotions, in the grip of the moment is more on you than you are on yourself. You are not able to do these processes, right? You're not able to break them down into such logical, simple sequencing, right? So what is discover? Discover is your ability to recognize, understand your moods, emotions and drives, right? You are a person who never wants to be late with your reports. So if you never want to be late, and that's the reputation you carry, to answer Rohini's question, your anger or your frustration is much more than a habitual offender in me who probably gets once in a while a little delayed. Chalta hai. You know what I mean to say, right? So what kind of importance that you play? And that has got nothing to do with this team member, right? That has got nothing to do with this team member. So many of us, so many batsmen get out on zero. But it's only when Virat Kohli gets out that he feels so frustrated, or he shows that in such great, because there is a certain thing that he brings in. So pause, label, know, right? Once you are in the realm of knowledge, you know what the trigger has come. You have got what we call as the view from the balcony. You're looking at yourself doing something from a higher plane. You're looking at yourself from the balcony, just like you're taking out, like this picture shows, right? You're being able to observe your thought. Any thoughts on this? Do you think you can do this? Is this doable? Is there a gap that you may find somewhere it is not doable?
Yes, I think this is very much practicable. But then I feel the first step, like as soon as you, pause and have a, I mean, as soon as you, like pause in that situation, automatically by practice, I think the next steps automatically comes to you, and you'll be able to,
Yeah.
I would say to manage that situation, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes, you are very correct. And look at a. I mean, I typically give the other example of a physical situation. You have a stomach pain. So pause. What is paining? Okay, stomach is paining. What did I have? Okay, fine. So let me go to the doctor. The doctor tells that your stomach is paining because of a certain name. You may not understand what gastritis is all about, but you have got a label now, right? And then he gives you certain set of medicines which you will take and it will make you feel better. Make sense? So the discovery phase is over now. You are in a better state of mind to work on your body. Similarly, emotions are also the same. I'm feeling angry. So let me tell myself, oh, I'm feeling very angry now. Angry to the intensity of 9 on 10. I need to bring it down. Why am I feeling angry? Not because of this guy, but because I have always put such a high premium on coming out right. Okay? This knowledge helps you to deal with the emotion. The second phase is discern. Discern basically is being able to see patterns, right? Discern is being able to, if there are 5 different objects, what does a child do? You make the child discern. Another word for discern is distinguish, right? Which is yellow, which is blue, which is green, right? If you have a young child at home, that is the first stage of learning, right? You ask the child to stack up on colors, stack up on sizes. Similarly, stack up your emotions, discern your emotions. Look at the patterns of thoughts, because thoughts are like stories. There's one thought is one aspect of that story. There is one story that has come to you, right? And if this story is repeatedly coming to you, it is telling you something more about the kind of stories you're feeding yourself, right? What is the pattern? Why is it that getting late makes you more angry than or non-submission of a term paper for some teachers makes them more angry than writing rubbish in the term papers, right? Have you seen that some teachers just cannot take a late submission, whether you write good or not? But for others, the quality matters. So what is the pattern that you are following by? What is your pattern of thinking? What is your pattern of judgment and beliefs? Am I making sense to you? Right? Okay. And patterns and beliefs are very cultural in nature. So for example, if you are dealing with a Saudi Arabian client, right, it is very important for you to build rapport. Right in the first meeting, you cannot give them the contract document. Right? Sayed, who's here, who travels across India and Africa, probably you will agree with me, right, Sayed?
Yeah, right, right.
You cannot give them the brochure or the document first. You have to build relationship, have tea, coffee, a lot of that, and then go and do it. If you do that, you're violating a pattern that they have, right? And these patterns give you automatic stories. What is the automatic story that Saudi Arabian guy is loaded with? Oh, this guy only wants to do business. He's a transaction guy. He does not want to build relationship. That is the automatic story with which you are working. But the automatic story for a German is, you know what? I'm here to do business. If he doesn't sign on the dotted line, there is no relationship after that. Making sense to you? So these automatic stories are the biases or the cultural remnants in our minds. They put us this thing, right? They put us into our mind some of these elements, and they become norms, social prejudices, social norms, and these automatic stories are always feeding us. Another way to look at automatic stories is your past experiences. Say, for example, you have a flat. You gave it out on rent to a group of bachelors. They did not keep the house properly, etc., etc. The next time, you don't want to give it to bachelors. You only want to give it to married men and women, right? So you give it out to married men and women. They also did this. So what is it? Your automatic story has got refuted, right? we are all we are all loading automatic stories into our mind. Sometimes these stories are based upon our own experiences. Sometimes these stories are borrowed from the stories of others. And the media today plays a very big role in loading us with automatic stories. Would you agree with me on that?
Quite a bit.
Right? The WhatsApp university, as we call it, right? The automatic stories. It just goes on and on. And you don't even have an alternative frame to look at it with, right? You're emotionally charged. So moment you have one automatic story, try to give yourself more options. What else can I do? What are the other stories? What else could also be equally true? Truth is always a story that we tell ourselves, guys. Our truth is our truth, may not be the truth for another party. That is why you have a judiciary. Both the parties equally believe, right, that their story is the truth, isn't it? And what they're fighting over is alternative frames. Am I making sense to you? In your own mind, your mind sometimes tricks you, right? Sometimes tricks you. There's this beautiful example, this role play that we used to do, right? Where you have kind of, you came to office with this cake for this lady, and this lady is nowhere to be seen, right? And you see that her monitor is also switched off. Then you ask another person, and that person also says, no, I think she went off. I mean, I saw her going. And you say, oh, this is what she does to my friendship, huh? I got a cake for her. You're kind of ready to dump the cake in the dustbin, and just before you do that, she shouts your name, right? Hey Ravi, wait man, I just went to clear the table. I know I saw you coming, right? I know you might have something. Let's go to the cafeteria, right? Now we have certain stories. Our stories get empowered with the stories of other people, right? Your neighbor will also say, oh, I also gave my flat to that bachelor. All these bachelor fellows. You could be losing a prospective son-in-law there, for all you know. Right? You understand what I mean? So look at what are the alternative stories which are available for you. Don't go by your biases. Your biases have a role to play, but your biases need also to be observed. Are they making sense? Are they collective biases? Have I experienced this? Or am I borrowing it from somebody else? Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, hi Ravi, Sucheta here. So I will, I completely agree with you what you're saying. Like for example, these things used to happen with me also. That's why I'm sharing. Like people giving status updates Like, see, I'm so happy. I got a job in a big four. I'm wearing those tags. I'm happy. I'm going out with my colleagues and having this of food in cafeteria. So we used to think that, oh, she's going through a wonderful life, and we start thinking that my life is so bored, and I'm sitting back in my home and going on studying, preparing for higher exams. So yeah, it's in our hand what to see and what not to see. It's better to shut the notification of those people who are just flaunting their lives and creating those biasness in ourselves. So I completely agree with you. So
Yep,
this is one of the weapons which we can use to manage our emotions.
yep. To the story that you talked about, Sucheta, you might want to read up this guy called Mark Manson. I will give you some of the reads in the WhatsApp group. Right? He has this book with a very obnoxious name, but don't go by the title of the book. He actually makes a lot of sense, right? About alternative frames. Frames are like maps. We create mental maps, and these maps have a tendency to make us look at the world that way. For a
Yes,
long time, the map that the West had for the rest of the world, for Africa, was that it was a dark continent, right? And
correct.
because everybody who was white looked at the rest of the world as white man's burden. So that's the personal value lens, right?
Yes,
Which is hired from the society. Look at your
yes,
reactions. Is your personal value lens coming in the way? Casteism is a personal value lens. Is it helping you? If it is helping you, sustain it. If it is not helping you, change that. Because your values are like the principles, are like it's like the sutras that you create out of experiences. And you borrow them from parents, from friends, from society. Right? The next thing to look at is see the way you react. Is it impacting you and others? Is it productive? Is it worth it?
correct.
Wo- No, is it worth it talking about giving
Yes,
tongue lashing to that guy who did not give you the report? He might have had an alternative frame. Maybe there's something wrong in this COVID times. The only time we call up people, now to Vivek's point, is when we need work, right? We are always calling up for some task or for some work. We are meeting for work. Now in the office that never used to, that used to happen, but there was also meeting casually. Now how many times have you made casual calls to your colleagues just to check on, not because you want to make sure whether they're going to come in for tomorrow's morning's meeting, but just to check on how are they feeling without an agenda. You know what I mean to say, right? So these are some of those things, right? And this is where your emotions come. So what I would suggest to you is try and see if you can play around with some more frames, right? Life can give you a bad card at any point in time, and bad things happen to good people. That's how it is, right? But can you change the frame like Viktor Frankl did? Is there an opportunity for you to adapt, right? Not react so much, maybe react a little, or adopt a completely different frame, a frame which is not given to you, right? Make sense? And it can help you to manage and sustain the behavior change. Because if it does not change in your behavior, if it does not make you look at different stories, your mind will keep you feeding you with the same stories, and you will keep on getting worried, and you will keep on going down that same road, right? And sometimes, two roads diverged in a yellow wood, you know that, right? And somebody
yes,
some one road and somebody take the other road. Choices are there. Give yourself more choices. Don't take your decision by chance. It should not be one choice. It should be more choices. And then make a choice that I want to take this. Yes, I want to be true to my emotion here. I'm going to fight for this cause. I'm going to take a stand. So be it. But that is a studied choice. That is not because WhatsApp University told you to do that. You understand where I'm coming from?
yes.
Right? And this is playing out to you, by the way. This is exactly playing out to you in front of you every day. This theater of the absurd, as we call it. Right? Everybody is deciding on everybody's life. and they're not deciding on their own lives. Right? Okay. So I will pause here, and what I will like you to do at the at the dot of the hour, what are one or two things that you want to do differently today at the end of this session? Because this is a journey. I hope you understand, right? And I'm so thankful to Kakoli, to Sucheta, to Rohini, and to all of you who kind of came across, to Vivek, to Chandrakant, that you shared your experiences today. It is difficult. Guys, the moment you start sharing, you become vulnerable. You put yourself under the spotlight, but you also get a view from the balcony. Thank you so much for doing this. That is the first step. Right? What are some of the things that you want to do differently after this conversation? I'm not saying that this conversation is a major, landmark or milestone, but you've spent a couple of hours. Does this leave you with some thoughts? You can talk about it on the chat window. Sheeja, you want to add anything that I could have missed out?
Yeah, just to sort of synthesize what we've talked about for the last 2 hours, everything, what we're trying to change about ourselves is to give ourselves the power to make the choice. Many of us react to emotions in a very automatic manner without thinking through it, and then, regretting our actions, and not, benefiting from making progress in our lives because our actions have somehow come in the way of, that path, right? So, as we said, first step is to pause. Secondly, you look at your emotions, you understand, you label them, acknowledge them. Then you move on to understanding, because emotions don't, exist independently. There are thoughts attached to it, there are stories attached to it. So review all of that, see where this emotion is coming from. What is the thought that is driving this? What is the thought that this emotion has sparked? What is the memory that this emotion has sparked? And look at it, evaluate it, and then make a choice based on your personal values. Make a choice based on how it's going to impact important relationships, and make a choice based on whether this choice in itself, this action, is sustainable for your growth. That's the deciding factor. If it's not going to serve you well, then
Yeah.
you need to be able to change that behavior.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to survive in this current world.
I mean, just to kind of give you a sense of how stories or thoughts are shared. Imagine the entire world before Galileo thought that the world was a flat plane, right? It was not round. That the sun was going around the earth. The earth was static and the sun was to go around. Imagine, because that is all that we could see. We could not see an alternative reality. Make sense? Before the DNA came into being, we never knew that we could genetically get diseases. Now
Right.
this is what alternative frames we have now gotten. Right? Some of the stories we have lived from our childhood. Oh, we are not good at it. Oh, I am not as fair as somebody. I don't look as beautiful as somebody. Oh, the blue color does not suit me. Some of these stories we have are simple. Some of these stories are much more insidious. They are against communities, they are against people, they are against a certain thought process. This is what it is. Right? They are self-limiting beliefs, as we call them. We put limits to I'm not good at math. Why? I scored 0 3 times. Why? The teacher did not teach me, I did not learn the lessons. That doesn't make you good at math or bad at math. Right? You get what I'm trying to say. Okay. So the key thing is, when you are deciding on change, look through these three lenses. What we call as the personal value lens. Is this valuable for me? Will this impact people around me, the relationship? Can I do this on an ongoing basis? Is this sustainable? Is this sustainable or is this unsustainable? We sometimes take a stand only for the moment, only to regret later. Right? You have you heard about emotional buys? Right? You go and buy, you put a great debt on your credit card and then later regret it. Right? That is one thing which is also, by the way, a very emotional reaction. Huh?
Instinctive.
Instinctive buying, yeah. Look at it through sustainability lens. It will make a lot of sense to you.
Absolutely.
Right? Look at
Yeah,
it through sustainability lens. Right?
great.
Right. So Ravi, can I come here and make 2 points? I have 2 points to make. So probably uh, summarizing whatever we discussed, we talked about that it's really important to to be self-aware, and during that process, even if it requires forgiving yourself, even if you have committed gravest of the mistakes, it's really important first to be aware of that what have you done. So probably forgiving yourself is the first step towards anything. And then often we come across and we use this, just like Suchit also made a point that people put it on their social media stories that these are their achievements or successes. So grass looks greener always on the other side, but in during that process, somehow we also forget that the grass in my lawn was never taken care of. So maybe I forgot to water the plants. So if I start doing it regularly, if not regularly, then maybe once a week, the results will be there. So that's another lens, or that's another perspective of looking at things.
Right. And suspending judgment. Yeah, she has a green grass. Beautiful lawn. Comment on it. Yeah, your lawn looks beautiful. I'll give you the pictures of my roses when my roses bloom. Fine.
Yeah.
Today your grass is green. I will comment on it. So what? Doesn't mean I am any less. You know what I mean. One of the things that we suffer from is this. We kind of get into this automatic story of, is she or is he trying to play a game of one-upmanship? Right? Are they trying to up the ante?
Right.
You don't have to up the ante. Yeah, you want to up the ante? You are great. You're great. I say that in Hindi all the time. That's the slogan that Sayyid would know about it. आप महान हो मैं जवान हूँ, which means I have also, because मैं जवान हूँ, मुझे भी महान होने का टाइम है. Right? I have the time on my side. I will become as महान as you are. आप महान हो तो महान हो, रहो महान, कोई problem नहीं है. Right? I don't know. I mean, that's the. I mean, we should not reduce it to something as banal as that. But I hope you understand what I mean to say, right? I have the time to do my own things. Time will come. I will work. I'm learning. That's the process of learning.
Yeah, I'm going to use this phrase going forward to manage my emotions, Ravi. I
Hmm.
liked it.
A lot of people will show you, right? How mahan are
Yeah.
they? I am
Yeah.
great,
People
right?
are nowadays busy in showing off.
Right, right. So you should always tell yourself that.
Yes, exactly. I love what Ravi said.
Yeah.
Right? So everybody is trying to put across that, right? I mean, I am great. I am great. Yes, great Chalisa is on. I mean, I call it, right? Great Chalisa is on. So I will sing my own great Chalisa at a point in time. No problem. Okay, great. Superb, guys. So I think we should continue this conversation more. Some of the very good, I see some very insightful comments, right, coming from people, right? As we say, there is a lot of science behind it. There is a lot of spirituality behind it. We will share with you materials from both these sides, right? And try to give you a perspective through the weeks. But again, my request to you would be, just like some of you took the opportunity to share yourself here, it may be just a video that you take of yourself or an audio capture and share your stories, because that is what keeps us knowing that you are interested in your journey.